Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I am Mackenzie Winninghoff with SBP. We have a large group, so we ask that you keep your mics muted throughout the presentation. If you have any questions or comments, please type them in the Q&A box and we will respond to them at the end. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded, and I will be sending out the slides from today's presentation later today, so look out for that in your inbox. SBP is a disaster recovery and resilience nonprofit working to shrink the time between disaster and recovery. As a part of this goal, we have partnered with the Walmart Foundation to present webinars focused on educating disaster recovery leaders to fortify people against unnecessary suffering. SBP has 5 interventions: building efficiently, sharing our model with other organizations, preparing home and business owners through resilience training, advising municipal and state officials, and advocating for policy changes and improvements to the disaster recovery industry. We believe in a holistic approach to disasters, increasing resilience before and streamlining recovery after. Now I'll pass it over to our Senior Government Advisor, J.R. Sanderson.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie. So if you're interested in attending some in-person training, our next will be May 23rd through the 25th in Savannah, Georgia. We'd love to have you there. Next chart, please. We are going to continue on with our webinar series, and we'd ask that you sign up for these. We've got a couple of really interesting webinars that I think that we're going to see here in the near future, specifically the mitigation options and finance lessons learned that I think are just phenomenal courses that I think help grantees across the nation. So with that, please sign up for these, and we'd love to see you on these webinars and continue the conversation. Next chart, please. We also have, if you would, follow us on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is our primary source in which we talk about a lot of different things in the disaster recovery response world. So if you're interested in that, please follow us on LinkedIn. Next chart, please. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about managing contractors. And in managing contractors, this is an interesting topic that we all have to do with, and something that we'll just spend a few minutes here talking about. We'll give you our view of it. If you have a contrary or a different view, you're welcome to type it into the chat, and at the end we'll have a discussion about it. Let's go to the next chart, please. So the very first thing that we're going to say to anybody and everybody about managing contractors is this all starts with writing a good contract. If we do the work up front and we write a good, clear contract, and we are very specific, and we remove all the ambiguity in this, then generally we're going to be okay. Both sides know exactly what the expectations are. We've set very specific performance metrics, and this generally works for us in all forms of life. And so what we sit down here at the bottom, I think, is very interesting. It's if the contract is clear, the relationship will be clear, and if the contract is unclear, the relationship will be ambiguous, if I can say that word correctly, ambiguous, and we don't want that. So what I'll ask you to do, if you're a fan of the show Big Bang Theory, is channel your inner Sheldon Cooper here and have yourself a relationship agreement and have yourself a roommate agreement, and think of it in those terms, because that's the level we need to be at. And if we're not at that level, then we normally almost always are going to have problems with contracts. So let's go to the next chart and then speak here a little bit about how contracting goes wrong. What I will say to you in the contracting going wrong world is we see this all the time. So just follow me through on the little chart here that we've built. So a grantee gets money, and a grantee then either writes a bad contract or fails to hold the contractor accountable, or the double whammy, writes a bad contract plus fails to hold the contractor accountable, and we fail to achieve any outcomes that we started out in our disaster recovery. You know immediately what's going to happen next. We're going to lose public trust. When we fail to achieve outcomes, we lose that public trust. When that happens, political pressure hits. You can or cannot have HUD or other political involvement, and so we fire the contractor. Now, the minute we fire the contractor, no more outcomes are happening here anywhere. So we've stopped all work across our disaster recovery, and all that's doing is causing more and more loss of public trust and more political pressure upon us. So we fire the contractor and we start over. Then we realize, well, wait a minute, that didn't work. So we replace the DR staff. Now the DR staff, if they're public servants, normally don't get fired. They just become the chief potato inspector at the Department of Agriculture or something. But we have a new grantee team and we start all over again. So what I will tell you is that I've seen this too many times in my work here that I do across America and looking at disaster recoveries. And I would also say to you that this certainly applies to subrecipients, right? If we have a bad subrecipient agreement and we fail to hold subrecipients accountable, or we have a double whammy there, we'll fail to achieve outcomes, we'll have the same problem. So I just ask that you think about this, and what we're trying to do here in this course today is alleviate a bunch of this, and we're going to start with this idea of writing good contracts. So let's go to the next chart. And here, regardless of how you're running your program, whether it be a grantee centralized model or whether it be a subrecipient model or a hybrid model, you're going to need contracting. This is a force of nature that we have in the disaster recovery world today. You need contractors and please do not hear anything other than from me than that there are good contractors, that are good, wonderful companies out there that do great work, and then there are others that are not. So you have to be judicious in your hiring of contractors, but look at how many contractors are involved in this. Even if you run a grantee subrecipient model, you could very well have contractors at the grantee level, and you could have them at the local unit of local government, UGLA, or the subrecipient level that are going to provide the direct goods and services. If you run a hybrid model, you could have contractors running all over your state organization. So either way, what we're trying to do here is get goods and services to eligible citizens after a disaster. I'm specifically here talking about housing, and the reason I talk about housing most is because housing is the hardest. We can always pass money to infrastructure or economic revitalization, but truthfully, if you can do housing, then you're a really good organization. Let's go to the next chart. A couple of major points I'd like to make here on public administration and contracting, and just ask that you consider these. The first is that this is leader business, and this is something that when we go out to do a major contract, this is hard work. It does require a great deal of coordination. It requires a great deal of public interface with the folks who do this at procurement offices. What I say to people is the scope of work is the most critical. And I also say this, contractors will walk in the door and tell you that they want to be your partner in this disaster recovery. So what I say to people is, I appreciate that. It's a wonderful gesture, but I'm not looking for a partner here. I'm looking for an employee. So what we say to people is that the contract is an employer-employee relationship. And in order to set yourself on good ground here, we offer the free advice of doing your homework. If you don't do your homework, you're going to fail here. You got to know the market, and candidly, you got to think like a business. So contractors will always play on your insecurities as a public administrator. It's part of their business schema, if you will. They will tell you that you don't have the expertise to do this. It's far too complicated. Let the experts handle it, and we're here to partner with you. And a couple of common tricks that contractors will play. And again, not all contractors, so please don't misunderstand me here. There are some very, very honest, good, noble businesses out there, but a lot of them do this. So you'll get what we call the bait and switch. The bait and switch is they'll send you the resumes of some really, really top-notch people, and they'll sell you that dream team, but you don't get that. What you get in the end state is a pickup team of the cheapest subcontractors that they could find. As always, with all contracting, you have to watch the next bullet there, which is that bad contractors have a tendency to bid it low and watch it grow. So they're going to bid at the very lowest, ensuring that they win all those points, and then they're going to watch it grow. You'll also hear this idea that it's not my job, your contract says. So if we don't know what we wrote in our contract, then we're off to a bad start. And then constantly this idea of let's renegotiate the contract, and we don't ever want to do that. What we want to do is get building going, get people back into safe, sanitary, and secure homes as quickly as possible. So with these major points, let's move on to the next chart. I'm going to spend just a minute here talking about some other critical aspects that we have. So this is a $90+ billion industry in America today. If you think of all the disasters that have taken place, this is a huge, huge thing. So we have to ask ourselves, first of all, on the left-hand side of the chart, what do contractors want? Well, look, they want profit, reputation. They want the ability to grade themselves. They want limited accountability. Never, ever fool yourself and think that contractors are not in collusion with one another. They want quick decisions, not necessarily the right decisions, and they want to determine the timeline for your recovery. Well, the truth is that as a public administrator, you need to be thinking about these things, and you need, on the right-hand side of the chart in the blue, you can see here that you're going to have to decide what the acceptable profit margin is. And you're going to, they want your letters of recommendation so they can send them to other states. You don't have to give those to them. This is a very, very small community. Generally, everybody knows everybody else. You can certainly throw my name out there and somebody will say something good, bad, or ugly about me. But I don't take that personally. So then you look down here at this idea that they want to be able to grade themselves. Well, if you can't do that, you're running a major enterprise level area-wide recovery. You have to hold them accountable. We believe strongly in carrots and sticks. The carrot is that if you are producing well, we're going to reward that behavior. And candidly, if you're not producing well, we're going to penalize you. So that is something that we do talk quite a bit about. If you get down here to the bottom of the chart, though, one of the things we say is the contract is not a secret document. The contract, the more people that know what the standards are in that contract, the better off you are going to be. Oftentimes in large governmental organizations at the state level, we have so many contracts going on that we just don't know what the contractor is supposed to be doing. Well, folks, that's a recipe for disaster. So this is not a secret document. The more people that know about the contract, the more accountability you'll have in that contract. So with those opening remarks, let's move here now and talk about a couple of other different subjects. Next slide, please. And here I want to spend just a minute talking about the difference between a fixed fee and a time and materials contract. I am a huge proponent for the fixed fee. Let's go to the next chart, please. And what we're talking about here in a fixed fee contract is this is an outcomes-based contract. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide for the contractor, basically, this is what we expect to get from you. And when you send us an invoice, we expect to have unit cost times number of units, extended course, or percent of task complete, depending on whatever our benchmark was. This is a deliverables-based contract. So I would encourage you when you're writing contracts to think in these terms. We offer this as a service at SBP. So if you're writing a major contract and you need our help, we'd certainly be willing to pitch in on this. So because we've done this a couple of times and we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's go to the next chart. The next is a time and materials contract. I will tell you that this does work in certain places of America. I have seen this actually work where we're going to bill a specific amount for each task. This, however, is a management and administrative nightmare because you're now going to have staff names times number of hours. You need timesheets for all the contractor staff, and you've got an itemized list in your invoicing. So this can become harder. I have seen this work before, but you really have to be on your A game in order to pull this off, in my opinion. You're welcome to disagree with me. Let's go to the next chart. And here I want to talk just briefly about this. Some of you have seen this chart before. We use it in our contracting classes. This is a proven methodology, right? So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to write the draft. We're going to coordinate that draft. We're going to publish that RFP. I will tell everybody to conduct a pre-bid conference. I believe that the government gets a lot of good questions coming out of that. Some of them are whines, but a lot of them are genuinely good questions that I think help to make a better product. Once you do that, then you're going to select the top three. I believe strongly in a brief off. I believe in bringing them in, major contractors, especially implementation vendors, or if you're doing construction contractors, I'd have them brief off, and then you got to award the contract. You're going to need the help of your procurement experts, and you're going to need a 3 to 5 member selection panel. What you don't want to have in this is a protest at the end of it. But finally on this chart, I would like to draw your attention to the very right-hand side over here, which is don't write a great contract and then lose it at the negotiation table. I have heard of this happening before, in which states would write a great contract at the state level, and get to the negotiation table and the people say, well, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. Folks, you can't do that, right? That's just, if we've got a plan going in, we need to say you're going to meet the qualifications of this RFP, and it really needs to be something we're thinking about. Let's go to the next chart. So in your procurement, if you know under the CDBG-DR rules set, we need to follow either your jurisdiction or federal, whichever is the strongest. You're going to have to screen contractors for disbarment suspension. That's something that is a notable quotable there that you see oftentimes in HUD reporting. But what we are really trying to do here, folks, is build a program in which we can assign houses to contractors rather than having contractors bid out individual houses. So how do you get around that? Well, you have to have some competitive procurement in accordance with 2 CFR 200 somewhere in the chain. So I showed you a bunch of chains earlier of how grantees do this, centralized or decentralized. But if you have in that chain a competitive procurement, then you can assign a house. Now, for those of you that have ever done individual bidding on individual houses, you know the paperwork and administrative requirements that come with that become just tremendous. And candidly, this eats away your admin budget. So, you only get 5% if you're a state grantee for your admin. So you really need to watch this. And you really want to put yourself in a position where you can say, hey, contractor, you either take 123 Pine Street or you pass on it. You get 24 hours to decide. That's the way you want to do this. You don't want to have 27 contractors show up at 123 Pine Street, each one of them turn in an individual bid, and then you adjudicate each individual bid. I can tell you that that's not the way that we want to run a enterprise level area-wide disaster recovery, because that's going to take us years to do. So think about that when you're working through this. Let's go to the next chart. This is important because candidly, you don't want to have any friction between you and your contractor. So now we're going to start spending a few minutes talking about the stewardship of federal taxpayer dollars. We want your program to continue running efficiently and effectively. We don't want you to have a stupid media event in which we fire a contractor, because that'll be on every news station all afternoon. And what we want to do is we want to reduce any friction between the grantee and the contractor, right? So, or the subrecipient and the contractor. So regardless of where you're at in this chain, we need you to be thinking about this. So this is important stuff because this is recovery, okay? So especially in a housing recovery. Let's go to the next chart. So what we don't want to do, and if we fail at this, we're going to waste a lot of time. We're going to have a lot of substandard work. We're going to have delays. We're going to have bad press. And yes, we will have lawsuits at the end. I guarantee you we will have lawsuits at the end. We don't want that. So let's go to the next chart. So we've already talked about this a little bit earlier in what contractors want. Clearly, profit is what's going to bring people to you. So one of the things you can control is the profit margin. In addition to that, you will find a lot of contractors who will walk in the door and say, we want to do all of this work. That is controlling the market share. If they control all of the work and all of the housing market share, then you've got 1 point of failure. My personal belief is that I would never, ever do away with market share. The way that I prefer to see this, the way I prefer and the way I've done it myself and the way that I encourage others to do it, is that if you have a building contractor who does 3 or 4 houses well, then give them another 3 or 4 houses. And you're going to grade them along the way. They also want to be paid quickly. We'll talk in a minute about how fast cash makes fast friends. And everybody wants a good reputation out of this. So look, there's a lot of honorable companies out here who want to do this and do it well and faithfully and be a part of a very successful program. And again, also, there are those who are unscrupulous. So we have to watch both of those. You know that. So let's go to the next chart. So here, what I will say to you again, I'm back to channeling your inner Sheldon Cooper, if you will. Everybody's got to have clear roles and responsibilities. Now, one of the things that we see quite often in our assessment programs when we go out to assess grantees or subrecipients is we see that we don't really have clear roles and responsibilities for what the contractor is supposed to do and what government employees are supposed to do. So oftentimes we see, in some cases, in some extreme cases, it does look like a 5 and under soccer game where everybody's just running after the ball. Nobody generally knows what the roles and responsibilities are between the government function, which is paying the bill, and the contracting function, because it gets so murky. We've got to take all that ambiguity out of a good contractual relationship. We need to ensure that it's stable, that it's transparent, and I cannot overemphasize to you the importance of a win-win relationship here. So for those of you that have studied relationship theory, this has to be a win-win for both the grantee, the person or the subrecipient who's giving out that contract, and with the contractor. So it needs to be a win-win relationship. One of the things that I will tell you that I am adamant about is this idea of co-location. I will not stand for a contractor to work on me remote. Can't do it. I just can't afford the risk of that. So wherever the disaster recovery headquarters is, I would encourage you to put that contractor and you give them the space to work right there in your office, because you need to be able to talk to these people frequently. And this idea that we have to set up meetings with them, well, that can get pretty rough pretty quick. So let's go to the next chart. So you have to set an environment here of we, as opposed to us and them. This is hard to do because oftentimes your public servants aren't being paid near what the contractors are being paid. And in some cases, they may be doing very similar jobs. So one way you have to do this is to set a leadership environment of cooperation and not opposition. Having said all of that, and it may very well be a partnership that you're going into, my counsel to everybody is that there's always a senior partner, and that senior partner is the person who's paying the check. If you want to get contractors full and complete attention, tell them you are going to stop payment on something. At that point, you will bring them all to the table very quickly, because this is about their ability to make a living and pay their people. So we have to have a clear understanding of who's in charge here, and it cannot be the contractor. I have unfortunately seen in my disaster recovery experience far too many grantees and subrecipients who simply hand the keys to the castle over to the contractor and say, contractor, take care of this terrible, evil disaster that we've had, and you go fix that, and here's your contract, and we don't check on you for 5 years, and then you show back up and you've taken 17 or 18 million dollars out of the coffer and you've only done 6 houses. Now, if you can tell me that that's never happened before, then we can stop this right here. That if you can tell me that that doesn't happen, we'll stop the webinar right now. But it happens all across America. It happens to subrecipients. It happens to grantees. And so oftentimes we just can't do that. So things we know we can't do, we can do, and some things we know we can't do. So let's go to the next chart. It has to have that sense of we in all of this. So here we're going to spend just a little bit talking about this idea of common languages. For those of you that know our teachings, you know that we constantly teach in our theory, our disaster theory, that we have to have a common purpose, a common plan, a common process, and a common language. Folks, the construction language is special in and of itself. And so we all need to know what an ECOR is, an estimated cost of repair. We all need to know what a damage assessment is. So we need to know what those terms are and what they mean. We all need to know what the term notice to proceed means. So if we don't have set standards for doing this, we're going to have problems. Another point that I would make here is that oftentimes many of these contracting firms have spent a great deal of money building their own internal information technology systems that they use. Having said that, it does not matter if it doesn't come into your system of record. So whatever your defined system of record is, if it didn't happen in your system of record, then it didn't happen. This is especially true when it comes to squabbles between citizens and contractors. And so we need to have all of that, including all of the conversations that we've had with citizens, listed in our system of record. So let's go to the next chart. And I want to spend just a minute here telling you that, if you're wise and prudent, what you've done is you've written into your contract that all contractors have to follow all of our policies and all of our procedures. And if we change them, then we will give them notice, but they do have to be and work in accordance with all of our policies, right? So one of the things that I see across America, though, unfortunately, is that we don't have really, really well thought out construction policies. And then subsequent to that, we don't have really good thought out warranty policies. And then beyond that, we don't have a way of adjudicating between a disgruntled citizen out there and a contractor. So what I would say to you is all this can be solved, not all of it certainly, but 80% of it I think can be solved by policy, right? And a policy is a standard. So what's the standard? How are we going to do this? So we need to think about these things. We need to think about really good construction policies because this is really hard, especially when you're talking about a disaster damaged home for a low to moderate income citizen. We want to do it right. We want to make sure that we do have a good warranty policy, and we want to make sure that we've got a methodology to adjudicate quickly and say, well, no, that's not part of the scope of work, or it is part of the scope of work. Let's go to the next chart. I believe strongly in this, right? I believe strongly that you have the capability and you put it in your contract that you're going to train your contractors and you're going to train them on your policies and on your procedures, on your action plan. You need to train them on standards of behavior. My goodness, they cannot treat your citizens like cattle because you're going to have to go stand at some point in front of a group of your citizens and they're going to say, wait a minute, these contractors are just mean people. We don't want mean people, right? So you need to train them on standards of behavior. They have to follow all of your policies. And specifically, I'll go back here one more time to this idea of your system of record. If it's not inside your system of record, then it didn't happen, and it's really kind of a moot point. So they need to follow all of your policies. And when you decide to change policies, you give them notice. You can bring them in, as I've often done, and had conversations saying, look, contractors, we want to change these policies. What are your thoughts on that? And ask for their input. Regardless of what input they give me, it may be valid, it may be invalid, but it's the leadership's call to make, and the leadership makes that call, and then the contractor is going to have to follow that policy. So those are things that I would ask that you think about. Let's go to the next chart. And here, what I would say to you again, let's go back to channeling our inner Sheldon Cooper here. And look, we need metrics. We need to continually measure performance. And candidly, let me be real clear here. You need to grade your contractors. If you are a subrecipient and you have 4 or 5 building contractors that are working for you, or 10 or 20, or if you're a state grantee, you need to grade the people who are working for you because grading means something to people. So let's go to the next chart and we'll show you some examples here. This is kind of a report card that we would do. This is from years ago from work that when I was leading the South Carolina disaster world. So I'm going to grade these contractors. I'm going to grade them on the number of total of homes that they've completed, how many of those they completed on time, and then how many of those were first time pass. Because one of the things we don't want to do is go out there and do the punch list for the contractors. Those of you that are familiar with what I'm talking about now probably said, amen. I'm tired of going out to a house 5 times and it turns out that the government's doing the punch list for the contractor. So first time pass means something, right? It's a great quality indicator. Let's go to the next chart. And here we spend a little bit of time talking about open warranties. If you go in and do a shoddy job, we're going to have a lot of warranties. Warranties are the big thing that contractors hate because they're not getting paid to go back out for a warranty job. So one of the things we have to think about here is this idea that that contractor only wants to go out there one time, finish that job, and go on to the next one. Especially a building housing contractor. He doesn't want to go back and back and back again to fix bad work. So know what your warranty policies are, know how many of those you have open, because folks, this will really, really tie to the reputation of your program. Your ability to manage warranties, I think, is really critical here. Let's go to the next chart. And what I will say to you again is they got to follow your policies. You got to tell them up front, you got to train them. And, we also have to penalize people. So I certainly upset the entire disaster recovery world when I came out with a policy back in 2016, and I said that a normal house will be so many days, and if you don't have that house constructed by then, we're going to charge you contractor $100 a day. So this was our stick. The carrot was that if you do it before then, you're going to get more and more work with us, and we were paying a premium at that point. We use Xactimate. I believe Xactimate or RS means there's a lot of good construction technology out there you can use, but I would encourage you to use that. And we were paying Xactimate plus. So what I will tell you is that, if you don't hold people accountable to a standard, you're probably not going to get anything out of them. That's just basic leadership 101 right there. And it also applies to contractors. Let's go to the next chart. So, You absolutely have to have and demand good customer service from your contractors. I don't know how often this happens across America, but I do know that in the programs that I have seen, you do have some contractors that will go out there, and oftentimes what they do is they'll sub out to a mom and pop to do a floor or to do a roof. And what ends up happening is that the mom and pop outfit goes out there and leaves beer cans in the house, and that makes the citizen mad. And now we've got a complaint, and we have to go deal with all that. So you have to know what the standards are. What I would also say to you that is also critical here is I tie together this idea of construction management with customer service is that if you've got a problem, we need to elevate that problem quickly. Oftentimes we'll see this in the nature of certain counties that are very, very slow in permitting, right? You have to have a building permit in order to begin. In order to get that building permit, the citizen had to have paid their taxes, a lot of things that we could have covered earlier in a signing agreement. But my point here would be that if you have a problem, we need to elevate it quickly. Now, let me also say here that oftentimes this may not necessarily be all on the contractor. Sometimes citizens can get a little crazy, and I know this is shocking to everybody on this particular webinar, but citizens will lie to you. I can feel the shock coming back all the way here to my computer. So yes, they will lie to you. So we need to elevate problems quickly. We need to adjudicate them quickly. We need to get the work done. So I ask you to be laser focused on getting the work done, getting people back into safe, sanitary, and secure houses. Let's go to the next chart, please, Mackenzie. So I believe strongly in making your contractors report. I would put that into my overarching contract. I would tell them the frequency. I would determine the system. And I would tell them that, look, we're paying for these outcomes. The state, the grantee, or the subrecipient, you're paying for outcomes. You need to know that you are getting those outcomes. So one of the things that I certainly required of contractors working for me was a long, hard, arduous Wednesday morning in which they were required to come in and show cause on everything they were doing. And I just believe that's a very good way of looking at the world. So I believe in making contractors report, put it in your contract, make it part of the standard things that you're doing here. Let's go to the next chart. Look, folks, fast cash makes fast friends. If you can do this, right, and you have a strong finance department that does not have 27 levels of authority before we can release a payment to a contractor, you're probably going to be okay at this. I know in South Carolina, at one point, I think we were down to 10 or 11 days between a good invoice and a payment. That makes all the difference in the world. Some contractors would tell me that that was worth as much as 10% of profit because they could cash flow their business. So those of you that have studied the business world, you understand cash flowing and you understand what's happening here. So what I would say to you is that you've got to pay quickly. You have to have a methodology. One of the other things that we teach in our other coursework here is that, look, you're not responsible for bad invoices. So if a contractor sends you an invoice that's shoddy, that doesn't match the pictures or the photographs in your system of record, or you don't have a complete accounting of it, send it back. It's not on your clock. Having said that, if they do send you a good invoice, you don't need to have 500 levels of authority before you can release this grant money. You need to pay them quickly. And candidly, you need to be competitive because everybody around you is also building. So as everybody else is building, this is a business. So I told you earlier, I believe strongly in thinking like a business in disaster recovery, and you need to offer competitive pricing. If you need to raise your prices, then raise your prices, but you got to be competitive. And I would always encourage you to think about fixed pricing, and I would use the Xactimate system as the basis for that. Let's go to the next chart, please. So it is absolutely critical that you monitor for quality. I believe strongly in compliance. Compliance is one thing, but look, you need to make sure that you're getting what you're paid for, right? And you have to take ownership of quality. It's real easy to go in the disaster world and find contractors who will go in and do shoddy work. And unfortunately, if you allow that, then you set a standard that's going to tear up your program in the long run. So you need to have some methodology for adjudicating quality. We used what in South Carolina, what we referred to as the old guy platoon, the famous old guy platoon, some of whom I think are on this webinar today. And you know, they were responsible for adjudicating quality. If they went out there and said this is a quality standard, then they would tell the citizen, this is the quality, this is what we're doing, we're done. Or conversely, if they said this is not to standard, then the contractor had to fix it. So I would say to you, put eyes on the ground and check all the steps in the process. But what you don't want to do is use this great, wonderful federal grant that we've gotten from HUD here and put people back in shoddy houses. We want those houses to be resilient because we know we got another storm coming. So things to think about from that. Let's go to the next chart. What we've done here is we've spent quite a bit of time talking about housing and construction management, a little bit about pre-con, a little bit about post-con with the warranties. But this is hard work. And so what I would say to you is contracting is everybody's business in disaster recovery. And so I would ask you to think about that. So with that, I believe now I'll pass to Mackenzie for any questions that she's seeing in the chat box, and then we'll close.
Thank you, JR. I'm not seeing any questions right now, but if anyone has any and they want to drop them in the Q&A section real quick, we'll go ahead and answer those. Otherwise, we will go ahead and move on to these next quick slides. I'm not seeing any coming in.
Okay. All right, next chart, please. Next chart. All right, so if you would like to join us in person, we will be holding our leader practitioner course. This is you'll learn something from the cadre at SBP because we've all done this before. More importantly, you will learn it from your folks on your left and your right. You know, if Oklahoma will learn from New Mexico will learn from Puerto Rico will learn from the Virgin Islands will learn from the Solomon Islands. So look, folks, this is a small community, and we offer this course. We will offer our next big pitch is in May. We do this in Savannah, Georgia. It's a wonderful time. SBP also takes you out to eat in the middle of all this. This is all paid for by the Walmart Foundation. So yeah, I'm the one guy who comes on to your webinar and hawks a free training event. This is free, right? So we reimburse up to $650 for transportation. We pay for your hotel room in Savannah. We take you out to eat to get to know your peers, and you'll learn more from your peers than you ever will from me and my team. And we will learn a tremendous amount from talking to all of you. And the entire end goal of this certainly is to make disaster recovery in America better, faster, quicker, because we just got too many disasters coming toward us. Let's go to the next chart. We'll encourage you to come to us in the next webinar series. I'm real excited. I've asked Joe Boys to run this mitigation options piece in April. And I think that will be a wonderful, wonderful course. I think that we need to be thinking about what we can do with mitigation. We know now that in most of our federal grants, CDBG-DR grants, 15% of that grant is going to be dedicated towards some sort of mitigation. So we need to be thinking about that. Then Michelle will cover the finance lessons learned piece. This is always a very popular course. So if you have finance people out there, we'd like for you to attend that. On June 7th, I personally do the culture of preparedness pitch. It will be hurricane season before we know it. And so folks, we would ask that you be thinking about that. And then we're going to do some common pitfalls, and then we'll cover out through the rest of the year. So thank you for attending today, and we appreciate you. And if you need me, or if you need our SBP advice team, please reach out to us. We've got our emails are on just about everything, and we do answer our emails. So let's go to the next chart. And as always, we ask that you follow us on LinkedIn. We do post quite a bit of stuff on LinkedIn, and we ask that you would think about that. So with that, I believe I'll pass back to you now, Mackenzie. I believe we're done. I did not see anything in the chat. Folks, thank you for attending today. We do appreciate all of you. And if you need us, holler at us.
Yep, as JR said, thank you for attending today, and we look forward to meeting with you on any future webinars that you may attend, or if we see you in person at one of our leader practitioner courses. I mentioned at the beginning that we will be emailing out the slide deck from today, so look out for that in your inbox. And thank you again for attending on behalf of SBP and the Walmart Foundation. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Thank you.